Over the next 20 minutes, I'm going to share my lessons learned bootstrapping Trust Keith to $1 million of annual recurring revenue. However, before I do that, I'm going to share a little context on some of my startup experience that led up to Keith, because those are a lot of the lessons that have compounded into enabling Keith to get as far as we've got so far, as well as, I guess, lessons learned before this as well. But quick explainer on the name Keith. Keith is a reference to Family Guy. What is the most unattractive male first name in the English language? It's Keith, and that surely embodies the stereotype we all have for someone who works in compliance. And that's why we've riffed on that. So trust Keith with your data compliance. So my first venture was a angel-funded startup, a consumer app called Flickstream, and we connected people to go and do skiing together. And I made all those sort of classic entrepreneurial first venture mistakes, not least going into the consumer space, but also without any kind of tangible revenue model. But it was a very good time. You can see some of the pictures here. We wrapped a car. We went to the X Games. We almost signed an X Games athlete, but he wasn't very interested in our equity-only offer, which was unsurprising. But with the backing of the same shareholders, I then pivoted quite drastically to music discovery. And what started as another direct-to-consumer app quickly iterated with learnings that I made towards a business-to-business offering that ultimately became a white-label music streaming service for mobile network operators. And I was out there pitching that to the likes of Labara and giffgaff back in 2016. However, this time round, I'd probably gone a little bit too enterprisey and actually failed to get any kind of pilot off the ground. From there, finally, iterated to something that did start working, which was We Delight. And again, this is following now the customer pain of we want our customers to spend more, engage more, and kind of following that thread. We Delight was a physical gifts as a service business, the kind of precursor to Reach Desk, focused on customer success teams. Now again, this was still a bit of a failure, but at least this time we got some revenue. Got about $1,000 a monthly recurring revenue, and we sold to our first set of SaaS customers, Typeform included. But again, ultimately, this is 4 years in. We'd almost run out of venture money that we had. Wasn't really any investor interest. And after 4 years, I thought that's time to call it quits. However, took all those lessons, reset, and came back in 2019 to launch Trust Keith. And this time, as I'll share, it is working. And that, again, is just some of the lessons I'm going to touch on today. So I'm going to run through how I got started, how we scaled to $1 million, and some of the key lessons that punctuate that. So how I got started. This time around, I was very intentional. So I was really key to say, right, these are the mistakes I made last time. Don't want to make them again. And I basically itemized these lists, including not having to raise venture. I didn't want to get in that trap of ever chasing investor fit as opposed to customer fit. And that was some foundational constraints. And you can see a few others on here, which I'll highlight a couple. B2B, not B2C. I wanted to make some real money this time. A must-have, not a nice-to-have. Again, I wanted to make my life easier for selling and retaining customers, and going after a market that had validated competitors in. I think, to me, that's such a green flag when you see other vendors in your pain or budget space that are at Series C or at 300 person. To me, that's great validation that there's a need, and you can go and niche and find your position off the back of that. The final one to highlight would be a build time of less than 2 months. So I'm a non-technical founder, and it was really important to me that I could just hurry up and get out and start selling. So again, that was a hustle kind of constraint that kind of got us going. So with that in mind, then set out to go and understand the problem. And this time round, brought in our prospective customers or experts that I knew in the industry to try and involve them in the research space and really ensure that we're solving a real pain. And I bribed them with bottles of wine or cases of beer because everyone's on LinkedIn and you actually get a pretty decent response rate. So with the right cohort of people, I then set about going through a research methodology to, I guess, really understand how they were perceiving the problem, what the real underlying problem was. So I combined the mum test, which for those unfamiliar is that sort of principles of asking non-leading questions. So instead of asking, would you use this, you say, tell me about the last time you did X, or what did you spend last time to try and solve this? And it ends up following you down a path towards a real tangible, real-world answers. Combining that with jobs to be done, which is a product management methodology, which kind of states that people don't buy products, they hire them to solve their problem. And really getting to grips with that underlying pain that you're solving for your customers is really, really hard. And I think so few companies actually do it. So for us, it was the kind of items of they never wanted to worry about compliance again, or they wanted to win deals. These are the underlying things that ultimately there are a lot of different solutions to it, but getting to the real grips of what they're looking for was a bit painful, but really, really foundational for us. And it then basically provides this scaffold to structure marketing, messaging, product thinking, and everything else around that. So it's something we come back to again and again. And then finally, this time round, I didn't go and sprint out, build something, and waited for them to come. Started with an initial inkling of value based on that research, and then pulled the product from them, which is why it's probably taken us so long to build out the functionality that we now have, but it's helped us solve towards a more efficient path to product market fit. Next is to follow the money. Selling before you build. And I think the balance here, you've got to take a little bit of inspiration from the Fire Festival founder, where you've got to sell an exciting vision, even if you haven't yet built it, and backing yourself to go and build it once you've got that first LOI or contract signed. So that's something that I went and did. I focused a lot of my early days iterating the marketing messaging, building one pages like that, winging them out and saying, yeah, it's ready, do you want it? And then solving on the underside. But again, it's a real lean way to do it, and it prevents you overspending or investing in product that you haven't really validated with any tangible revenue. Next kind of insight that I learned was around following higher ACV. There's this graph here from Christoph Janz about how many customers it takes based on how much revenue they're making. But if you imagine a $10 million annual recurring revenue business, you can either go and get 40,000 customers paying $20 a month, or go and get 100 that are paying $100,000 a year. I know which camp I'd rather be in, but I think too often we forget what we're setting ourselves up for. The go-to-market motion to go and find and acquire tens of thousands of customers is so much harder than, say, an outbound sales motion to go and get, what to me always felt like a very tangible motion of like, well, if I can get 2 customers paying us $20K a year, we can get 10, we can get 50, and we can increase the ACV in time. But that's very biased on my own experience. And then, pretty fundamental, but don't run out of cash. Nearly all businesses fail because they run out of time. They run out of cash, they run out of time. They run out of time to find and solve a product market fit. They run out of time to add that extra bit of revenue. And this is one of the benefits of bootstrapping, is you have to tee yourself up for default alive from day one. It can be a slower process, but I would argue that the success rate is higher because you have so much more time to figure it out. And I think in a lot of cases, what we're all solving for technically isn't that challenging, but we set ourselves on quite ambitious timelines that we don't give us much place to play with. So that's how I got started, but this is how we scaled. So we can see a little snapshot here of our revenue growth. It took us about 3.5 years to get to $1 million of annual recurring revenue. And I think one of the things I take from looking back at this journey is just actually how long it takes and how patient one needs to be for the realities of growth. There's a lot of founders that I've got to know over the years who are now 5 mil of ARR, but in quite a few cases, it's taken them 10 years. And that's a great outcome. That's not a bad result. And I think being patient enough to realize how long these things actually take is just really healthy. I think if you'd asked a 21-year-old me when I was doing my first consumer app, I would have been in and out in 3 years, is what I would have told you. But here I am 9 years later. So that's what it looked like. And then to kind of break down the product evolution for us, we've always, as I kind of emulated or described it earlier, we've always taken that kind of MVP, minimum viable product approach to everything that we've built. And that's true with launching any new functionality. So to our customers, we might go and try and upsell them some new functionality. We might tell a nice story of how automated and efficient it is, where in reality it's us in the background. But again, we validate that, and then we can solve for creating something scalable and efficient later. There's no point investing in that yet, because we need to go and get that validation first. Again, not optimizing for scalability too early. I think, again, it's that point of validating it, knowing in the future that you can increase the gross margin, you can make it really efficient. That's fine. You can do that later. Right now, you're chasing for validation and real revenue. An example for us was, in the early days, our product was a Notion handbook with a kind of a SaaS pricing wrapper around it. And it's only in the last year or so that we've started moving to our own app, which looks nice and pretty here. But that, again, that's taken us almost 4 years to get to that point. And then just behind the scenes, just continuing to talk to customers. I think this comes back to that jobs to be done methodology and just continuing to stay really, really close to how customers are talking about the issue. So we've tried to be really intentional with how we do that, whether that's in the sales process. If we have a lost prospect, we'll try and interview them. If we've won a customer, we'll interview them. If we're launching new functionality, we've got a beta set of customers that we'll interview. Or if we churn and lose a customer, we'll chase to get that meeting in with them. And again, that's helping us iterate the jobs to be done, the framework of what are we actually solving, how is the customer actually perceiving the thing that we're solving. And then looking operationally, so there's kind of two probably key inflection points looking back in the business. One of them was hiring our head of ops. I'm not the most operationalized person, but having a leader come in, own the ops of customer operations or owning finance. I was doing manual invoicing end of each month. I used to have customers sending me cal invites to remind me to send invoices. And getting that off my books to get my time back was transformational and was a real kind of line in the sand of like when the business professionalized. So getting someone, whether that's inside one of the founding members or in time, is just a must-have in my book. The next, talking of books, would be implementing Traction. Traction's banded around quite a bit. It's quite a foundational book, but the elements in it are truly scalable. So for us, it's provided the framework to talk about our customer vision, our business vision, to define what KPIs, to create some accountability in the team and the real kind of operational rhythm to operate the business. And again, it's just a must-have. It's not impossible to put in, but it'll really help you going forward. Particularly, for example, the OKR kind of methodology and that side of things. The sooner you have it in place, the better kind of rhythm and lean business you're going to build. And then finally on this one, just talking about iterating. In our experience, probably every kind of 2 or 3 hires, everything kind of breaks. We have to rethink how we share knowledge, what the recurring meetings look like. And I think there's a new kind of perspective of we don't need to over-perfect because 6 months later, we're probably going to be redoing it anyway. So just preparing for that side of things. And then what our customer acquisition looked like on our journey to 1 mil. So the first part was very network-driven. That was me reaching out to founder friends I knew, or in some cases, my business coach. And what I did is I basically went through their LinkedIns, very methodically kind of pulled out all the intros that I wanted, put them in a spreadsheet, and made it really, really easy for them to make intros. And I just went back and did that again and again. And that's where probably the first sort of 5K of MRR came from. And it still continues to be a line item in our meetings generated that I'm accountable for. And I think too often we kind of step back from the impact of our network. Like if your back was against the wall and you had to find another 10K of revenue or whatever it is, you would pick up the phone. You would ring people you know. So do it now. The next is word of mouth. So this is something that I think at the time probably wasn't that intentional, but in hindsight I can kind of highlight a few things that kind of stood out. We've been really fortunate where a lot of our customers have come from referrals and word of mouth. But I think that's because of 2 things. One, we've really over-indexed on giving a really good customer experience, which helps and definitely compounds over time. 2, our ideal customer profile is very focused, which helps us drive a little bit more virality within that community. So ours is head of operations at Series A tech businesses in London, probably a pool of sort of 600 or 800 individuals who are all in certain communities that we're now in, and our customers are now in. And it means actually that of that pool of people, that's not that many to drive a little bit of word of mouth. So by being really focused on that, we've helped that engine actually grow. And then finally, outbound. So outbound, I think, comes in and out of fashion, but for us, it's been a pretty fundamental channel for us. It just works. It's a bit of a numbers game, number of dials in, meetings booked, customers won. It works. The stack that we use at the moment looks like this. So it's Cognism for our sales data, HubSpot for our CRM. We moved from Salesforce because it's way too enterprisey for the kind of styles of business that we are at. Jiminy for call and coaching, particularly useful when you're handing over from founder-led sales to in-house to be able to kind of come in and share feedback and things like that. Really, really important. LinkedIn, again, everyone's on LinkedIn, leveraging that with Sales Navigator. I'm picking up the phone. We've never been afraid to do cold calling and that side of things, and it can be a bit awkward, but it works. And a lot of companies aren't doing it because maybe they themselves hate receiving cold calls, but actually people do pick up, and it does work. And then underpinning all of this has been just our continual iteration of our product messaging fit. And this is a bit of a theme you might be gathering from the job speed framework that we've put together, the marketing messaging kind of iterations and things like this. For us, it's really, really important that we can anchor in our customers' minds as quickly as possible what we do and what problem we're solving. So it's something that we're often revisiting, particularly, for example, our marketing website. And you can see just some of the headlines that we've iterated on over the last couple of years. They're all pretty nuanced. They probably all say the same thing. But even little things like moving away from the all-in-one data protection solution, I think that's way too vague and doesn't really mean anything unless you've already warmed up the prospect. So that is quite a whistle-stop tour through some of the lessons learned over the last sort of 4 years and prior to that. The three kind of key things that stand out to me. One would be follow the money. That is solving for what customers are willing to pay for. It's working to drive your average customer value up and following your enterprise customers, holding on to them as they grow. Two is staying focused. I think ultimately our ideal customer profile you're solving to have as close to one as possible. So know that that's what good looks like in the end. You're solving towards that. And I'd argue that's the same with product functionality as well. The more focused you can become, the more you can be to one persona, and the better you're going to resonate and become a de facto name in that environment. Additionally, it's just avoiding that temptation, particularly the longer you're at it, to, I guess, the shiny object syndrome is always going to feel like, oh, but this other feature here, or what if we spun off this elaborate sort of side project? Just stay focused. You're not there yet. And also as well, I think looking around at our peers, and a lot of them are here who've raised money, or you look on LinkedIn and their headcount looks huge. These are ultimately vanity metrics, and I think the tide is going out now, and we'll see who's swimming naked. But just focus on the fundamentals. And finally, be patient. Rome wasn't built in a day, and neither will your company be built in a day. There will be many, many ups and downs, and the ability to keep a level head and not get too emotionally invested is really, really important. And I think just remembering that it's always going to feel really fragile. It's always going to feel slower than you want. But you just got to keep going. It's not meant to be easy. So keep innovating, keep being patient, and the results will come. And that is a quick intro to some of the lessons learned. If you want a copy of any of the frameworks or templates shared, then drop me an email or come grab me at the end. Thank you.